I'm ready.
Hello, folks. Welcome to Repurpose. I'm Nick Rothwell, and joining me today is Dan Green. Dan, thank you so much for joining me. Folks, just so you know, Repurpose is an ice hockey podcast based around guys who played hockey in the UK. And over the next 60 minutes, we're going to talk about how Dan got to get involved in the game and how he fell in love with it, to his pro career playing hockey for, I know, the two teams that I saw you play for, the Sheffield Steelers and the Nottingham Panthers. And then also the third period, the inevitability that happens when you're a hockey player. One day you're going to have to hang them up, and we're going to be talking to Dan about all of that. And I'm sure we'll have that overtime period too. But just to give everyone some context as well, this is the first recording that we've done since that tragic event that happened in Sheffield. This podcast is not going to be about that, but I just want to give you guys the context that this is the first one we've done since that. And it's rocked the hockey community. And it's just something I wanted to acknowledge that, that huge tragedy that has happened. And Dan, like I said, this is all about you today, buddy. And thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, no worries at all. I'm looking forward to it. So yeah, it should be a fun interview.
Yeah, Dan, I've known you for a long time. You've had that inevitable position as a goalkeeper, but also a goalkeeper who has played mainly as a backup. That's going to be a very interesting position for people to hear about. So I, I want to learn more about it. I want to learn no more about your journey. And we're going to start off as we normally do with the first period, which is how you fell in love with the game. So I'm gonna, and I keep saying this. I need to get a countdown, 20-minute clock here. But for now, being as that this is the first series and we're just getting it done, I'm going to use the 20-minute countdown on my phone. So let's start off the first 20 minutes, Dan. Growing up in Leamington Spa, how did you get involved? Well, we were born in Leamington Spa. How did you get involved in ice hockey?
Yeah, so I was born there, but I grew up down in Bracknell, or 5 minutes from Bracknell. So that was obviously where I grew up playing my junior hockey. But it was a really random one for me. I know obviously living in Nottingham now for so long, a lot of the guys here, hockey's really big here. They grew up here. They're on the ice quite young. I didn't really get on the ice until I was around 9 years old. It just not really been something I'd done. You've obviously been to Bracknell's ice rink, just one small rink kind of in the whole area. Um, we saw, we went to a game. Me and my dad went to a game. We saw the Bees play. We'd seen it advertised. Not like there's advertising now. We like drove past the rink and we saw a sign out front. The next home game. We went to the game. I remember we played Air. I think they were called the Air Bruins at the time, and I think Air won like 8-5. And obviously, we didn't really understand the rules, but it was just fun. We just went. It was I think I'd seen it hockey on TV before, like on the Winter Olympics and stuff. So it had always intrigued me. Anyway, we went to see the game. I then went back with a bunch of friends from my school. Like, we went and had food and watched the game. And I think that was it for a little while. And then after that, we sort of got into going and it just became our thing. Like my mum started coming and that was our thing. The Bees games were always on a Sunday, 5:15 on a Sunday. And all three of us would just go and watch the Bees. And that was kind of our thing. A lot of my friends obviously went to football or did other things. But, on a Sunday, that was our thing. Have lunch and then go and watch the Bees in the evening. And yeah, that was kind of where it all started from.
So that would have been like the early 90s.
It was,
No,
I think, yeah,
yeah.
sort of mid. I think the first year that was maybe around like 94. I saw a few games, and then the next year we kind of, I don't know if we had season tickets, but we sort of went all the time then from around about 95.
Yeah. So I think I would have. I was in that arena, or the John Knight Leisure Center, a couple of times around that time, and it was always like it was kind of the arena pre Sheffield and pre Nottingham. It was known as like the really nice arena in the
Yeah,
area. It was always. I remember everyone's like, look out for the carpet, because John Knight had the John Knight
yeah,
carpet.
yeah. The JN, yeah, it had especially in the bar and stuff in the restaurant, it had a
Yeah.
JN in the cup. But no, you're right. Like it's funny again, all the guys here give me stick about how bad that rink is. And I'm like, yeah, but back in the day, that was the place. Like, exactly, no Nottingham, no Belfast, no Sheffield, no Newcastle. It was, for me anyway, it was, Basingstoke, Slough, Bracknell, and it was only, I think Bracknell was built in about 87. So when I started going, it was only 6, 7 years old. So, and it was an Olympic size ice. So obviously that was a bit different as well. I think it was the first ever Olympic size in this country. Um, so yeah, back then, believe it or not, it was quite luxurious. Now you've got all these super arenas and not so much, but yeah.
Yeah, it was the rink of the time. I remember that in Basingstoke and the Olympic size ice pads, as you mentioned, and they were also really big for figure skating too. I remember because they were Olympic size, so they
Yeah,
were rinks that were full of activity. Do you remember ever going like for your first skating sessions, and how did that kind of take part for you when you first stepped on the ice?
yeah, you're right about the ice kind of being busy. I mean, I remember there, it's the same as the ice here now. It was, 5 a.m. until midnight every day it was in use. It was public sessions, figure skating, obviously hockey, all kinds of stuff. It was because I think ice rinks were a bit more novel then. It was the only one in the area. So, yeah, so all I remember is I wanted to learn, saw the hockey. Mum, Dad, I want to play, I want to try. I remember they used to do like a learn to play session where you would show up, they would give you the equipment or any equipment you didn't have, and you go on. And it's so foreign to think. I remember getting on the ice and I literally couldn't skate. Like everybody else could kind of get around, and a few kids were a little bit better. And I'd never done it and I just couldn't do it. So they gave me a plastic chair to like push around the ice. And then once I'd done that for a while, I got upgraded to a little like traffic cone, and I pushed a little cone around the ice. And then once I'd mastered that, you sort of get going. But yeah, I mean, I remember obviously I was a goalie, but I started off as a player when I learned to play. And I just remember, yeah, all I remember is being on the ice at Bracknell, full equipment, skating around. We'd have sort of about a 40-minute session, and they'd split the ice into three. Um, Kind of going crossways, and you would start off in the low group, and after a few weeks you would kind of move up groups. My group could barely skate, and then once you could skate you moved up a bit. And but yeah, it was tough. It was something brand new to me. Obviously for guys like yourself growing up, you were probably on the ice when you were 3 years old, and it came naturally, but it was really difficult. I had some figure skating lessons. I wouldn't really, I certainly wasn't doing pirouettes and flying around the ice, but just, skating lessons with a coach. And like anything, it just comes after time. Probably after about 4 or 5 months, I was comfortable skating around the ice in my equipment. And yeah, and that was it.
Yeah. Do you remember who your figure skating coach was?
I don't, I'm afraid. No, I was
Do you
probably
remember
only about.
having do you remember having a crush on them if it was a girl?
It,
Because
it definitely was a girl, so I probably
yeah,
did, yeah. But no, I can remember doing them. It was at the far end of the ice under the bar. There's like a bar restaurant at the rink, and it was that end. Um, so I remember going up and down doing that, and yeah, I kind of have little memories of that. And then yeah, just like anything, you just sort of slowly get a little bit better at it, and then I ruined it all by going in goal, and that was the end of the being a player dream.
yeah. We'll talk about that. I want to go back to. I just have to note the reason why I commented about the figure skaters is because I was on the ice in a rink in Saskatchewan, and my dad would take me public skating. Just to because I was doing power skating drills, and I would go out onto the ice to do power skating. And one day there was a figure skater in the middle of the ice, and she was just doing some edge work and some three turns and some mohawks. And my dad said, Nick, go and ask her if she could show you how to do those things. And I was so shy. I must have been like, 9 years old. And I went up and I said, can you show me that? And she turned and looked at me, and I just was 9. I had this crush on her. I was like, my eyes just went, wing, and I just sat there. My jaw was like this, and I was just watched
Just not
everything she
listening to
did.
a thing she said. Yeah.
But no, actually, you know what I did, and it's funny because I would practice little free turns, and this was way back then, and then all of a sudden now you see, a lot of the edge work and power skating drills the guys are doing now, and they're going inside, outside, backwards, forwards with little, and the mohawks and the three turns. And it did become extremely valuable stuff that I learned that I then got to be able to pass on. But I did have a crush on her.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. No, I
I
wish
did
I
it.
could.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
wish I could remember my instructor now, but yeah, no, I don't. I'm afraid.
Dad, I want to talk about the hockey players. Which hockey players were you watching with the bees that you were like, and then were they on the ice helping you during the learn to play stuff?
So yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because you sort of look at kids now, like when I watch the NHL or even at Panthers games, you see the kids and it's like they're heroes, and you forget that that was you once. Like I remember, it's obviously a different era, but like when the bees used to train, they used to train on a Friday at about 6 o'clock,
Mm-hmm.
and you could just go and watch it, especially in Bracknell, obviously, because it's just a public rink. You can just walk in. So, on a Friday, like I'd get home from school, do my homework, whatever, and we would just go to the rink and I would just watch the bees train. And again, back then it was just like pucks were coming over the glass and it's just those sort of things. But so it would have been like Darren Durdle. Yeah, so that first year was like Darren Durdle. Oh goodness, like Kevin King, Brian Wilkie, Norman Pinnington. Um, who else would they have had?
Was that before Matt Cote?
Matt
He
Coe,
was,
no, yeah, no, he
yeah,
was
yeah,
there because back then it was only like 4 imports, and it was
yeah,
like
yeah.
Cote, Durdle, can't remember the other two, but funny enough, the goalie was Gary Brine, whose son now plays for Dundee, is the goalie in Dundee. So yeah, it was kind of that kind of era. But
Just so
yeah,
you know,
so
your hands covering a bit of the camera. If you just want to, yeah, we want to see your good looking face, buddy.
So yeah, I'm kind of showing my age there with some of those names, but
Yeah.
yeah, and also you're right, they did come on the ice, not with the kind of learn to play bit, but once I was actually playing for like the Bracknell junior team, it was really good. I remember I think it was kind of in their deal that every week they had to have like one or two guys on the ice. So obviously for me, when I was a goalie, having one of the Bees goalies come on the ice was, amazing sort of thing. But yeah, I'm almost certain we had one or two guys on the ice almost every week with us.
That memory that you had of like the pucks coming over the glass, probably hitting the nets, rolling down the back of the nets, and then coming onto the ice, and then probably I just remember kids running around our practices, and there'd be little puddles of water next to on the rubber matting and stuff like that, and they pick up the pucks and they put them back, and they would like there's a lot of joy in it. Do you remember that? Like, do you remember actually like going around and collecting pucks and throwing them back on the ice?
Oh yeah, I mean, especially if you remember Bracknell. I mean, I don't know how they got away with it for so many years, but there was no netting upstairs. Like the upstairs was just completely open. So if you sat watching a training session, there would be pucks pinging off the crossbar and into the stands and stuff. So yeah, I could walk around the lower bowl and the sort of seats, and you know, I would probably you would throw some back, but I would probably take home 2 or 3 pucks every week. My dad would be like, "We don't need more pucks," but like if you get a puck from a bees game, like I'm taking it home. It's like, and
Yeah.
obviously they'd all have the different logos on and stuff. So, and exactly like you said, that the puck with the puddle around it, and I'd kind of like hang around by the bench and watch from there, and they'd just be on the bench, just like between drills. But now you think nothing of that, but back then it was like God, I'm like, because in things like football, you don't really get that. You know, you don't get that access. But back then, especially in hockey, I could just hang out. Like I'd get a picture with them once in a while, or just chat to one of them, and
Mm.
yeah, I think that was. We say that now here. I think that's what really got me into it was that they were so accessible,
Accessible.
and
Yeah.
yeah, whereas and that's what they obviously try here. It's a bit harder in today's day and age, but I think because I thought I could talk to them and I could just go and see them on a Friday, and if after the game in Bracknell they'd go in the bar and stuff, and you could go and chat to them, and I think that's what kind of draws you in a bit. It's
Yeah.
so yeah, that was always really good there.
I think my first ever game in Bracknell, I was playing for the Sheffield Steelers, and I'm thinking it was a Challenge Cup or an exhibition game, and I do remember scoring a goal against Gary Bryan. He came out to poke check me, and I just kind of stepped around him and slid it into the net. And I just remember, like when I played those days, it was like 3 imports per team and maybe a dual national or a reclassified, and the rest of the team was British guys, British goalkeepers, um, and there seemed to be a magic in that time. Like you say, players were accessible. Fans didn't really care what the scores were. You'd have 30-1 scores, and they would be cheering just as loud on the 30th goal as they did on the first goal. There was like this magic time, I think, in the early 90s, because that's what I remember. And then I also remember the Super League days, and I remember the Elite League, the coming into the Elite League, and you talk about a time now when kids were running around rinks, ragging pucks, getting pictures with players when they're coming off the ice from practice, and just that accessibility, guys going into the bars after and just jawing with supporters until closing time. It was a community, and I'm just wondering, like, was that something that really kept you part of that John Knight Leisure Center and going to that rink and being part of it and talking about it to your dad and really feeling part of something when you were young, at a young age?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that was massively into it. I think, like, obviously hockey now in this country is so much better, in all areas, the standard of hockey, the standard of players, the social media side, everything. But I do think back in those days, it was just chilled. You just go to the game with your family. I would run around the rink and play with my friends, in the period breaks and stuff like that. And you have those friendships there, and yeah, you sort of felt like you sort of knew the players, and like you said, obviously you wanted your team to win, and you had, when we played Basingstoke, it was a big rivalry or something like that. But I think that there wasn't as much pressure on the players. For a lot of them, they were probably working as well at the same time. It was kind of like the NIHL is now, probably. And, they were kind of doing it for fun, and like the games, it was a different game. There was obviously a lot of scraps, and it was a lot less structured. The scores were a lot higher. And yeah, I think it was just, you would go and you knew you were going to see a lot of goals, a great atmosphere. There was no like politics or anything in hockey. Then it was just like you went, had fun, tried to win. Guys would be drinking in the bar afterwards. They were probably like working the next day or whatever. And it was just a different era as well. It was just a lot more, there's no social media. There's no real like highlights of the game. It was, you didn't really know how I remember, if the Bees were away from home, if the Bees were in Cardiff, the only way we knew the score was my dad would call the rink and be like, "Can you let us know what the score is?" And they'd look at the scoreboard and tell us. Or you could go on teletext at 10:30 at night.
Teletext. I remember the teletext scores coming
Yeah,
up.
and it's just a different era. But no, it was certainly a lot of fun then. It was
Yeah.
yeah, it was great.
I think also you just wait till Hockey News Review coming out as well every week.
And power
Just to
play, yeah,
find out yeah. I think it was
exactly.
both of it was a different time. It was very romantic. I feel so fortunate that I was involved in hockey in the UK in the 90s. It was a magical time. The early to mid 90s before the Super League.
Yeah, I think that was the you're right. It's like, and even into the Super League, it was really good, and it was, obviously, social media and everything's great and it has its purpose, but like you said, then it was just different. You know you could open up Power Play, and it was you know Mike Ware's player profile, and you'd learn all about him from reading the article. Whereas now you could just go on his social media and look at everything you want to know. But it was, yeah, it was
Mm-hmm.
cool. It was, oh, this week in Power Play, it's, whoever it is, or oh, you can
Yeah.
look at all the scores that you didn't know from last week and stuff. Yeah, it was just, it was different. There's good and bad, but I think
Yeah.
magical is the right thing. Like for me, I think that's what drew me in. I think if I started playing hockey now, I may not have stuck at it, because it's just a different, it's almost too professional from it. There's too much to it now. It's more, I just think it was fun back then, and that was all it was, really.
I got to talk about the day that was probably a dreadful day for your dad, because you said, I want to go in goal, and I know every dad or every parent is going, oh, don't go in goal, don't go in goal, because, well, you have to be a little bit crazy. And I don't use it crazy, but you're a little bit wired differently. Goalies everybody knows you guys are a different breed. but also the cost of the equipment. So
Yeah.
when was that day that you're like, I want to go between the pipes?
Well, do you know what? It wasn't really a day when I was like, I want to do it. So what happened was I eventually like joined the Bracknell team. I think it was the under 10s, but they were really, really good then. They hadn't lost a game for a year or two, and they were, Danny Myers was on that team. And the coach kind of said, listen, you can join, but you're not really going to play. We've got sort of three lines of players. You've only just started. You can train with us and you can play, but obviously we're really good. But we do need another goalie. We've only got, because with the age groups, you move up an age, obviously, is that we only have one, and then we're going to have to use like a younger kid. So is that something you'd want to try? And I just sort of said to my dad, like, well, I've never thought about it. It wasn't one of those, a lot of goalies I've played with, they knew straight away. They saw the equipment, they wanted to be a goalie, but it didn't really hit me like that. It was a case of, it's really the only way you're going to be on the team. And my dad was like, if it gets you on the team, see how you think. So showed up, they gave me all the equipment. I remember I went on, it was fine. Like, obviously kids can't really shoot back then. I wasn't getting hurt then, it was just weird being in goal. I went back the next week, did it again, and that's all I remember. That was it. I don't really remember saying I want to do this. It was just, I remember being in goal, and then I never remember not being in goal again. And I just think I kind of obviously did okay, and it was one of those things. I was on the team, and it was like, well, I'm on the team as a goalie, so I'll just do this. So that was
Yeah.
it.
And then how did it progress for you in the under 10s, under 12s, etc. And then finally you get this crack at maybe making a decision to play hockey as a career.
Yeah, well, exactly like you said. I just kind of worked my way up through the age groups. You know, again, I was never a superstar. Most of the Brits I've played within the elite league, your Lackos, your Stevie Lees, Weaver, Clark, whoever it is, John or Phillips, they were all probably the best player on their team every year. They, growing up, they were the best players in the country. That was never really me. I was just, played for Bracknell. We always had a pretty good team. I was okay, but I think there got a point when I was just doing it for fun. I enjoyed playing hockey. I enjoyed the friendships I had. Um, they were, I had friends at school, but I think my hockey friends were probably my best friends. And then I sort of got to about 14, 15, and that's when I started to being asked to train with like the older age groups. So, I was 14, but I was like training with the under 16. So all of a sudden I was on the ice like twice a week and playing 2 games a week. And then you get a bit older and then you're playing for the under 90, and because back then there weren't as many players, as many young kids. So, I was playing and training with groups older than me. And to be honest, it never really hit me as any sort of a career. I mean, playing for the Bees was obviously a dream, but it seemed like, especially in the Super League year, it was a complete pipe dream. It was like that would be the NHL for me, is playing for the Bees. But then I sort of got to, I think it was about 16, 17, and I'd played for like a couple of the conference teams, and I was really into it then. It hit me like the better I got, my passion for it went up. And then rather than just showing up and doing it, I was like really invested. Like I wanted to train well. I wanted to do well. And it was probably about sort of 16, 17. A couple of our guys had trained with the Bees once in a while, just like in the training camps and stuff. And it sort of started to hit me that I didn't really think it was realistic, but I just wanted to do it. I was like, oh God, just playing, earning money for playing hockey. And I think it was just, you probably remember for being around in Bracknell, even though it's not a big town, like the Bees players were treated like gods. Everybody at the rink knew who the Bees players were. And, the Super League was massive. And, we would obviously, the rink only held about 3,000, but we would sell out every game. It was, so I just sort of got that addiction for how awesome the Bees were, basically, and it kind of went from there.
Yeah, the Bees were awesome in the Super League days. I remember that team with PC Druin
Yeah,
and
Chassé
with
and
Chassé,
Chassé,
yeah, Denis
Goodwin.
Chassé, yeah, yeah. I mean, that was an also well, they won the league.
Yeah,
Was it Dave Whistle was the coach, right? Then,
was the coach,
yeah,
yeah, who actually
yeah,
coached here a couple of years ago. So we had
yeah,
some good, and obviously his Jackson was.
yeah.
I don't remember Jackson from Bracknell, but obviously Jackson was here as well, so he sort of remembers Bracknell a bit. So yeah,
I still think PC Druin's one of the best players to play in that league.
yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
I mean,
I love that guy.
he obviously played in Bracknell and he played here afterwards, and people here still say he was, one of the best players the Panthers fans have seen. So, but yeah,
Yeah,
the year we won the league, yeah, he was outstanding.
yeah. Well, listen, buddy, we've come to the end of the first period. Okay, so now I'm going to ask everybody what I ask everybody that's on this so far is what was your intermission routine? What was it? What did you do during the intermissions?
You know what? Honestly, not much really. I wasn't like, I wouldn't really take my stick between periods. I would literally just chill in my stall, have a drink, probably chat to a couple of the guys either side of me, maybe take off a little bit of my top half if I was playing, obviously, and I was hot. But honestly, nothing. It goes quite quickly. By the time you've gone in, taken your top off, had a drink, just chilled for a minute. The coach is coming in and talking, and then you're going back out. So no real sort of routine or ritual. I was just more of a chill in my stall and kind of.
There was some goalies that were always told just don't even talk to them, and I think Trevor Robbins was one of those guys
Yeah.
that people like just don't talk to Trevor Robbins. So with goalie pairings, what relationships did you have with goalies where you might do a little bit of chatting in between periods, or did you just always leave each other alone?
No, I think to be fair, you said that all of my partners, I would say, were fairly normal for goalies. I didn't really have too many, but I think after being with them for a few weeks, you kind of know what they want. I could have one like a Curtis Cruikshank. We would just sit and chat. He was or Stevie Lyle, Stevie Lyle's the most laid back human ever. We would just literally chat and we talk about, the period, but he was cool. But then you'd have some that you might say the odd thing like, good period or good save, or you might just, bounce an idea off them or something, but you wouldn't really like chit chat. You kind of,
Mm.
I'd always keep it professional, but obviously there were some that you might give a little tap on the pads to and just say the odd word, or there were others that might talk to you more and they might want to, chat a bit more. So I think every goalie partner is different. I have heard that about Trevor Robbins, and I have seen goalies that barely say a word to you. They're in that zone and whatever, but I think everyone's a little bit different.
Yeah, everyone's a little bit different. Okay, let's start the second period now. Dan, I want to know, when you were first offered that contract to go, you got a chance to play serious hockey, um, pro, semi-pro. It's the highest levels of hockey in this country. When were you given the opportunity? How did that happen? That kind of that bridge between junior hockey, in the big leagues.
Yeah, so the first chance I got, which was still to this day probably the sort of best experience, was I would have been about 18, Super League, and Brian Greer, the Bees goalie, got injured, and I obviously didn't know about that because again, no social media. I probably didn't even have a phone. Um, but Brian Greer got injured, and obviously I was just kind of the next senior goalie. I was playing under 19s or ENL, whatever it was called then. And I just got the call from, it might have been Ennio Sacalotto. Someone from the Bees called me. It was either him or Jane McDougall, if you can remember her. She
I
used to
remember
work for the
Jane. Yeah,
team. Yeah.
yeah.
And it was like, hey, Dan, would you be able to train with the Bees? One of the goalies is injured. And I was like, oh, God, yeah, of course. Like, so that was my, like, I'll call it my welcome to the NHL moment. Because for me, that was my NHL. And I just remember showing up to the rink with my equipment and just walking in that Bees dressing room. And, it's 15, 16 imports. I don't think there was any, there might have been, I think James Morgan was on the team, so he might have had one British guy. And, everybody's played, American League, NHL, whatever. And there's me, like, I probably weigh 130 pounds. I'm 18 years old. And I played for the Bees for about a month. Brian Greer was out for about 3 or 4 weeks. So I was training I've gone from training twice a week with 18-year-olds to training with, there was Dan Seaman, Mark Cadott, Goodwin was still there, Mike McBain. And yeah, I was just like playing for the Bees. And I was, playing the game, obviously sitting on the bench for the games, but we were going to Manchester, Belfast, and it was like the best month of my life. It was just after games and stuff, going in the bar after the game and all my friends are there and they just watch me play for the Bees, and, your parents are obviously there. Just going from being a kid to then playing for the Bees overnight was insane. And then, so I did that. And then the next season, exactly the same thing happened, but Joe Watkins got hurt, I think. Or I can't remember which way around it was, but one of them got hurt each year. And I remember in that first year, it was around Christmas. And, they played in London on Boxing Day. So again, I'm like 18. I'm going to the Docklands rink on Boxing Day, sold out London Arena, or, whatever it was called. Same thing happened the next year. About a month again, I think I played about 8 games, and it was the same thing. It's a few different players, but all sort of NHL caliber, a lot of them, and again playing another month in the Super League. So that was all, and that you talked about, wanting to do it. That completely fueled my fire. Having experienced that, I was just like, this is what I want. I need to get back to that level. But it took me a little bit of time after that. The Super League ended. They dropped down to the BNL because obviously, I'm never going to play for the Bees in the Super League full time. So it was almost good for me that it dropped down to the BNL. And then, yeah, I got the call from, it was Mike Ellis then, he was the Bees coach. And I was really hopeful of making the team. It obviously dropped down a level. I had a few friends sign, like Danny Myers again, signed for the Bees. And I'd met Mike Ellis before a couple of times. And what they did then was, for some of the British players, they held summer skates and anybody could come. And it was almost like a bit of a training camp. It was like 6 or 7 weeks where you would just go twice a week and we just scrimmage. And it would be all the Bees players that had signed. So there was like Mark and Lee Richardson, Danny, Mike Ellis, Ryan Aldridge. A few of the imports had shown up by then, and there was like 20 of us, and we're just scrimmaging, and we know he's going to pick the last few players from these things. And yeah, I just got a call, one August evening from Mike, and he was just like, yeah, we'd like you to sign for the Bees. And I'll still say that was probably one of the best moments of my life. Just getting that phone call, my phone just rang. I was just sat at home. And that was it. It wasn't a sort of a massive contract, but it was like, we'd like to have you if you want to play for the Bees. We're starting training camp next week. And that was it, really. Yeah. So it was, and obviously they'd signed Stevie Lyle. So that was going to be big for me. And I had a couple of friends on the team. And again, then it was 8 imports. So there was a really good core group of Brits. There was a good group of us that was really good. So yeah, that's kind of where it all started.
You had a few British goalkeepers that got starting positions then, but you're in a time now where they're bringing a lot of import goalies.
Yeah.
And it really was a position killer. Bringing in import goalies. If you were a British I keep saying goalkeeper because I don't know why. If you were a British goaltender, I always get my British and my Canadian keep pulling out of me. But if you were a British goalie, it was something where you had to make a decision to go, do you know what? I'll probably end up being a backup goalie. But also I'm kind of like drawn into the fact that you were also able to experience hockey at Super League level, where I don't think people understand what people like Kurt Kleinendorst and Chris McSorley brought into the league when the Super League started. This level of professionalism that had never happened before. All of a sudden you got even like full-time equipment managers that, pulling around crates of equipment and skate sharpeners to games. And it was this thing of like, we went from having to sharpen our skates in skate hire places to, you know, these teams coming on with the buses and all this stuff. It's just this level of professionalism that we'd not seen before. And the changing rooms change, the tactics change, the styles change. And you got to be a part of that, which I can imagine was just so enriching. But you're also in a position where you're probably not going to get a starting role. What was that like? Like, when did you kind of come to terms where, like, I'm actually going to, because I know backup goalies, I know enough about hockey. The backup goaltenders they don't get enough praise. It's a difficult role because mentally you have to be on the game since the drop of the puck, because anything can happen. When did you go, do you know, there's actually a role I can fulfill here and I've got the tools to be able to do it?
Yeah, I think that first year it was just a case of I just want to play for the Bees. You know, I knew obviously with Stevie Lyle there, I'm not going to play that much. But I was only 21. And I just thought, you know, practicing every day, because that's a big part of it, going from skating once or twice a week in the ENL or you know, whatever, to being on the ice every day, being in the gym, learning to be a professional, learning to, you know, it wasn't as professional as it is now, but, you know, eating better, recovering, looking after yourself, all that stuff. So for me, it was just get my foot in the door, play this first year, and then kind of see what happens. And then obviously I ended up moving up to the Elite League. And then that was really when the decision more came, where it was, am I going to really go for this? And am I going to dedicate a few years as a backup and try and break in and be a number one, or at least play a lot of games? I can always drop back down. You know, a lot of goalies did what I did, where they stepped up to the Elite League, didn't get a ton of ice, and they dropped back down to the EPL, which was still a good league with, you know, decent money, and it was still, you know, 4 or 5 imports. And then that's when the decision came, when I was kind of in the Elite League, and it was, yeah, you know, I'm going to try and break through here and you know, become a number one, or at least play a lot of games and kind of get my name out there a bit. So the first year with Bracknell was just like, you know, I'm playing in my home team in front of all my friends and family. It's my dream. And then after that, it kind of got a bit more like, okay, like, what am I going to do here, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. When I first met you, like I say, I think it was in Sheffield during the Elite League when Sky Sports started covering the game, and it was my introduction back into hockey, which I was really, really grateful for, especially coming up to Sheffield and you know, a place where I played for, you know, a bit of a season. But what was that league like for you? And then you know, who were the guys that you were playing with there, and what was it like playing in Sheffield?
It was great. It was a big jump. So I was in Basingstoke for 3 years, which was perfect for me because we didn't have a very good team, you know, smaller team. But that was great for me because I got to play a lot of games. You know, we weren't winning a lot some of the years, so I would play games, and you know, going to a bigger team is great, but it was great for me starting out in a lower team, getting a lot more ice time. And then the move to Sheffield came about. So Dave Matsos was the coach, and Doug Shepherd was the assistant coach. And I'd played with him in Basingstoke, and he was my coach there as well. But we had, you know, Rod Sarich, Jeff Legui, Jonathan Phillips, Jody Lehman, Ryan Finnerty, who's obviously still, you know, he's in Manchester. Yeah, we had a really good team. I mean, I don't think I realised how good we were. They'd won the playoffs the year before, and I think they finished second in the league. So I knew it was going to be a big step up. And obviously it was going to from sort of 2,000 fans a game to sort of 4,000 or 5,000. So that was obviously nice, you know, the arena and the facilities. But we had such a good team. I mean, I think we lost about 8 or 9 games that year. We won the league and the playoffs, playing in a big city and a historical team. You know, Sheffield have been around a long time as well. It was great. It was probably my favorite year of hockey, to be honest. You know, that year, stepping up to a lot bigger team, winning a load of games. We had a great group of guys. And yeah, it was an awesome year. Yeah, it was, as I say, it was probably my favorite year of hockey, that first year there.
And you mentioned was Jody Lehman your goalie partner then, or did you have
He
a
was,
couple
yeah.
of yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah,
this
no, it was
guy's
just,
probably he'll probably go down in Sheffield folklore, for being one of the better goalies that have played there. But also against
yeah.
for when he did that skate up against the boards and he
Yeah,
smashed his
oh,
body. Yeah, was that the
I,
year that you were there?
yeah, we won the
Yeah.
playoffs, and
Mm.
obviously, we had that rivalry with Nottingham anyway. We played Nottingham in the final, and it was in Nottingham. And I just remember we were winning we won 2-0, but it was 2-0, and we had a 5-on-3 power play at the end because they kind of lost their heads a little bit. So we were just keeping the puck. We were in our own end. We just spread five guys out and we just kept the puck away for like 90 seconds. So we sort of knew we were going to win. And I was kind of looking at him and he was looking over there at that section. I think it was Panthers fans, obviously. And he already knew that he was leaving. Like he'd already signed in Denmark, I think, for the next year. So yeah, the buzzer goes and he just jumped in the glass. And I remember we skated over and I grabbed him and like pulled him away because I was thinking like this is the best moment ever. Like we've just won the playoffs in Nottingham against them to secure the double. And I'm
Mm.
like, you're going to start a riot here, and I don't want this to ruin what's about to happen. And I don't know if you can ever see the video, but I grab him out the pile and just
Yeah,
drag him, and we all go over to the Steelers fans. But I was like, please
yeah.
don't start a riot now. Like we've just won the playoffs. So, but yeah, he was a character. He was one of my favorites. So
Yeah.
yeah, no, he was great.
Um, yeah, but the characters are great, and I love what you're saying, and I kind of want to get people to get a bit of a sense of the rivalry. People talk about rivalries in sport, but the people I've asked you because I did play for Sheffield for probably I don't know 12 or 15 games, maybe 20, I'm not sure, across 2 seasons, and I think maybe we played Nottingham once, and that would have been when Nottingham would have been in the top league, Heineken League, and we would have been promoted from English Division One to the BNL, and so we were still good. Would have been one league underneath Nottingham. And I think Nottingham, they had some amazing players, Paul Ad, and they just were very smooth, and they beat us, I think. So no one really had a sense of an idea then because Nottingham were, and I think you guys were playing. They were playing in the old stadium too. So Nottingham were the team down the road that were much better. So that was the only sense. That was in the like 91, 92, I think, or 93, 94. It was really early. So I never really had a sense of playing in any of the rivalry. It was something that was developed over the years when Sheffield finally got promotion and they were in the leagues against Nottingham. And what was it like, I suppose, for you when you were playing for the Sheffield Steelers? What was that like? What was the visceral feeling of what to play the Nottingham Panthers?
Yeah, there was. I don't really want to use the word hatred. That's a bit extreme, but no, there
But
was.
players do. That's the word that comes out though. They
Yeah,
like we hate, and I'm like, how can you hate?
I don't think it really exists as much now. I think teams have like a couple. Obviously Nottingham still want to beat Sheffield when they play each other now, and I'm sure you know it's still a big rivalry, but it was different back then. It was like it was bigger than just like when it was. If you play, everybody says, "Oh, it's just another game," but like if we were playing Nottingham like on Saturday, all week you knew you were playing them. Like it was in the media, it was like the biggest game. But I think as well, then we didn't play each other as many times. Like now, Nottingham, Sheffield play like 10 times a year. So I think it waters it down a bit. But back then, it was like three home, three away. That's it. And it was, yeah, like those games were just different. Like the atmosphere in the crowd, the intensity, just the rivalry, the build up. It was just a different, we could have been playing any other team the next day, and it was just nothing compared to that. It was just, we wanted to beat them so badly. And it was obviously the games back then, it was a lot more physical. There were more fights. It was, most of the time when we played Nottingham, there was a fight off the opening face off just to set the tone it was just, yeah, it was really intense. It was, there was definitely that hatred and that, we have to win this game. Obviously, we were both good teams, so you wanted to get 2 points and you wanted to beat a rival in the league, but it was way more than that. Yeah, there was definitely some genuine dislike between the players and stuff. It went a lot deeper than just 2 points, I think.
So here's the big question. What was it like to go from Sheffield to your arch nemesis in the Nottingham Panthers, place where you now are today? So
Yeah, it was strange. I mean, it was
how
one
did
of
it happen?
those. It was. Do you know what? It was purely a kind of, just a decision. My partner at the time was from Nottingham, living in Nottingham, so I was in Sheffield, but I was coming to Nottingham quite a bit anyway. Um, and it was more of a life decision. Like, it makes sense for me to come here and live here. There's no point traveling back and forth. Um, and it was a sideways move. It wasn't. I certainly didn't think Nottingham was any better in any way. It was just it was a life decision. It made more sense to come here. I had some friends on the team here already. Danny Myers, Matthew Myers, Corey Nielsen was the coach, who I already knew quite well anyway. But yeah, it was not too many people did that crossover. I mean, there are a handful of people that have done it, but I think it was more for me. It wasn't a big deal for me. It was purely a decision. Just for it made sense for me to do it. I think the fans, it probably took them a little bit of time to. It was funny. Two of us came because an import that played in Sheffield with me the second year did the same. We both came at the same time, so that probably made it a bit easier. Um, but yeah, it was fine. I think all the players and everything here were totally cool with it. I knew a lot of them anyway, and it was just a hockey decision. And I still had some really good friends. Jonathan Phillips, Jason Hewitt, Mark Thomas were all still in Sheffield, and I was still really close with them, so that was fine. But yeah, it was definitely different being on the other side of the fence. But yeah, it was fine.
And you ended up playing there for the rest of your career in the highest league in the country. And I know your save percentages was always high 80s. And what was that part of your career like? Playing, in Nottingham as a backup goalie who gets some fairly good ice time. How did you feel as a player there for from then until the rest of your career?
It was great. I mean, obviously playing here is great. Great facility, great rink, amazing fan base. I think then you get to that age where I was comfortable in my position, but I was always someone that wanted to push myself and be the best that I could be. I knew I was never really going to be a number one. I mean, there were a few stretches of time where I was through injury and things like that. Like you said, I was really lucky because Corey was my coach the whole time. He was great with me. He was great with all the Brits, where his passion was developing the British players. So practice would finish. A lot of the imports would get off the ice. Some would stay on. Um, but me, Stevie Lee, Lacko, whoever it was, we would all stay on the ice and he would just work with us an extra 30 minutes of drills, shooting. He's not a goalie, but he would really try and develop me. We would talk a lot. He would stay on the ice out of his way. He doesn't need to do it. He's the coach of the Panthers. He would stay on the ice for 20 minutes just with me, just shooting on me. And I think that was perfect for me. And, if you look at my stats, I played a lot of games. He got me into a lot of games. And I think he took pride in developing me, and also the other Brits. And that's what you need. And I was fine with it because I knew I was probably never going to be a number one. But I was like, I'll work hard, just be the best I can be. And because of that, I got rewarded with more ice time and more games. I'd play Challenge Cup games. If we were ever up or down by 3, I would get into games. And it was great. And I was comfortable with that. I was like, I'm going to push the number one goalie as much as I can. That will make them better and that will make me better. And if I get into games, hopefully I'll be at my best. And all I can do is give 100% and just see what happens. And I think because I was a good teammate and I worked hard and I did everything right and I didn't cause any, issues, I got rewarded with more ice time. So it was good for me. I was here for 7 years playing, and most of the time I played a decent amount of games. We won a ton of trophies, and it was great. Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, you really did define that position. I think for British, I don't say number ones or number twos, but because I always think you're a tandem. I think you're a team within a team. And you've got to work with some great guys. I love how you spoke about Corey. I think that coaches don't get enough. People don't know enough about the work that coaches do, and I didn't know that about Corey. And that's really a cool thing to know, that this guy would go out there and spend some extra time, because that's ultimately what the hockey was about developing, British-born players so that they can fulfill a role. And Dan, I think you filled a great role, and you're probably one of the guys that will always go down as a good, solid team within a team player. A guy who brought the best out of the other goalies that he played with. But I'm interested to know your highlights. Like, what's your like? You talked about the Sheffield, winning in the playoffs in Nottingham. Do you have any other highlights? And I also want to know is who are the hardest guys that you faced in terms of stopping the puck? Who were the most difficult guys to stop? So, two questions.
Yeah. Oh goodness. Well, I remember, if I'm thinking about guys that scored the most goals on me, I would probably say Adam Calder. Rest his soul. He tortured me, like when I was in, Coventry were always under Paul Thompson, they were the best team. So I would always get into games against them, and Calder, Carlson, Weaver, they just had so many weapons. So I think if you looked at who scored the most goals, I mean, Calder would be up there, and also Colin Shields scored a lot of goals, but just because of his longevity, but I played against him for probably 10 years, and he was always in Belfast, who were always really good as well. So those two guys, I remember. I don't really remember any other guys.
Do you remember any shots that really hurt? Any guys that
Oh
was winding up
yeah,
you, I don't want that guy to shoot.
yeah. Do you know what? It was probably more guys on my team though in practice, because I think in a game you get into that zone where you just have to stop the puck. It doesn't matter who's shooting or how hard. Jonathan Weaver, David Clark had big shots, but yeah, it was more guys in practice, I think, that you would see every single day. Guys like Jeff Ledwee, David Clark, just big, heavy shots that you would have to face. So there's some of the guys. I'm trying to think who else tortured me as a player. I mean, yeah, it's obviously imports kind of come and go. So I would definitely say Shieldsy and then Adam Calder, probably the two guys that I remember them scoring a lot of goals against me. I would imagine almost everybody scored against me at some point, though.
Yeah.
Like a lot of my friends, like I remember a funny story. Lacko, when he was like 18, he scored his first pro goal against me, and then I ended up playing with him for like 7 years. Trying to think of moments. I mean, for me, it was more like signing for the Bees that day was huge. Um, Playing those games in the Super League were massive. Yeah, Sheffield, I think winning that league, coming from Basingstoke, obviously not winning anything, to winning the Elite League and the playoffs. I grew up going to Nottingham every year as a fan, as a kid, watching the playoffs. And then when I was in Basingstoke, we wouldn't make the playoffs, but I would go and watch the weekend, and it was this magical weekend in Nottingham. So to then go to Sheffield and then win it in Nottingham was awesome. So yeah, definitely that one. Had some great experiences like in Europe in the Continental Cup. Played in the Champions League, obviously for the Panthers after we'd won. I don't know why we were in the Champions League that first year, but we were in it, and just going to Sweden, Finland, these teams obviously not doing very well, but I think the travel is a big part of it. There's probably not many European countries that I've not played in, either for Sheffield or for the Panthers, Champions League. So yeah, I would say they're probably my highlights, rather than kind of individual. Obviously, I've had good games, won big games and stuff, but I just think playing in those big tournaments and more winning things as a team, they're kind of the ones. And obviously doing the treble here, the year we did the treble was league playoffs and Challenge Cup was obviously a big one.
Dan, you've had a great career. I love the way you've defined your role. Like, yeah, I think you've had an awesome career, dude. What a way to end the second period.
Thank you.
And we're gonna pause because I'm gonna go toilet. Hold 2 seconds. I love that. No editing, just pausing. That's the first time I've actually had to break one of these recordings, Dan, because I had to go to the toilet. I got to remind everybody, this is an early morning recording. Normally I've had a couple of these to get me going. So
yeah.
Okay, so let's head into the third period, buddy. And it's something that I mention it all the time. The name of this show is Repurpose. And the idea came from when I transitioned from playing hockey into another career. I really struggled, and everyone would have thought that with my journey from hockey, my last game, the Guildford Flames, while I was actually being a presenter on Sky Sports, my two careers overlapped. They would have said, Nick, you've got the job of a lifetime. Take it with both hands and just run with it. You're on live TV with people like Gabby Logan and amazing, talented people. And it's something that I really, I was blessed. It was an amazing job, but I really struggled with. And I look back at it and it's like I lost this sense of accountability that I had in a changing room. I lost the fact that, I was known as a hockey player, at it doesn't matter what level, I was known as a hockey player. And then all of a sudden I'm known as a TV guy where I had no skill training. I was literally just put in front of a camera, and I'm very grateful for that opportunity. But I had this huge sense of imposter syndrome and like I was a fraud. And I really, really struggled with it. And as you know, I went down this path of using alcohol as a way to cope, and it brought me into some really dark places. And I'm not saying everybody goes through that, but there is a time where a hockey player who's carved out a good career and a niche within the sport has to hang them up. And I know you are still involved with the Nottingham Panthers, so I'm really interested to know about what it was like for you. I think 7 years in Nottingham.
Yeah.
7 years in Nottingham. You're known as Dan, the goalie, and you've always got a position there, and you're doing your best. You're getting extra coaching, and then all of a sudden, when was it for you where you're like, you know what, I'm gonna have to give up this position for somebody else?
Well, it was kind of, I mean, obviously when I was here, I knew, during those 7 years that obviously it's very daunting, but hockey's not going to last forever. And it was kind of always in the back of my mind while I was playing that, I'm going to be done in however many years, 3-4 years. And, obviously I've got the rest of my life. I was really lucky because, a bit like you, I kind of always had, I wouldn't say a knack, but I've always been okay with, in interviews. I've never had a problem doing an interview. I've always spoken quite well. So towards the end of my playing, probably about 3 or 4 years in, they started using me to do a few things like, if you go on the internet, you can see In the Green Room with Dan Green. And what we did was,
I think I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, every week it was pretty basic. I would just interview a player each week. But, I'd just get a few questions. It'd be about half an hour. They were my teammates. I was still playing. So it was just fun, And then they would also get me to go into the office once a week, and we would do a little highlight show on the website. But I would kind of talk about the game, break down a few things, whatever. So I was kind of, even while I was still playing, I always really liked the media side of it. And I was already kind of doing little bits, like, not great things, but a few interviews, a few things. If anybody ever wanted an interview, or they wanted to do a Christmas video, or they wanted to do something like that, it always seemed like I would be the one that would get asked. So, I mean, I'm not saying I thought I had a career in that, but I always enjoyed doing it, and it came quite easily. So I always wanted to do it, to try and do more and more. Like, you were saying about Sky Sports, like for me, that's kind of my still really, I would say, like my dream job, talking about hockey, whether it's on via play, whether it's on Sky Sports, whether it's online somewhere, I'm a bit of a student of the game. Obviously, I still do the commentary and the webcast for the Panthers game, so I'm doing it every week. And there's not really a big market for it in this country. Obviously, if you're an ex-NHLer, you can go to somewhere in North America and a TV station will hire you, or a radio station, but it's not really like that in this country. There's, not, I mean, does anybody really get paid in this country for talking about hockey or presenting hockey? Maybe a handful of people. So I kind of knew that probably wasn't going to be a job. Obviously, I also do my own sports massage therapy. So about halfway through my time here, I started training in that while I was still playing. I was really lucky. The team paid for me to do it, or not paid for me, but we were sponsored by a college here that some of the guys went to, so I could do a course. But it is really daunting, like you said. You just kind of roll through the years of hockey. All of a sudden, you're 32, 33, and you're like, yeah, like, how am I going to support a family? How am I going to buy a house and live and do everything? And it's different in North America, where a lot of guys I've played with went to college and they've got their degree in their back pocket, and then they come over here, play hockey for 10 years, straight into a job. It's not really like that here. It's, a lot of guys, a few of the guys I've played with have degrees, and it's a bit more common now, but 10 years ago when I was playing, everybody went to the elite league at 20 and that's all they've done. And, obviously they've all now moved on into new jobs, but sometimes it means at 35, like retraining, going back to college at 35, or night school or online. And, these guys have families, and, it's really hard. It's, like I said, in North America, with hockey being so big, if you've played at a decent level, you'll get offered a job in hockey, minor hockey. Again, here, loads of my ex-teammates coach like minor hockey at home, but they get paid really well for it. Again, that doesn't really exist here. Or they have jobs, in hockey somewhere. But again, the money, hockey's not big enough here for us to do that. So it is really difficult. I kind of trained on the go, which was good. I was doing my massage. I was obviously doing a bit of my, media stuff. And obviously I was really lucky to kind of get offered that when I stopped playing. But for other guys that maybe don't want to do that, or maybe don't like that side of it, it is really difficult to maintain a full professional hockey career and try and look to the future as well. And there's the other side of it, like you said, the kind of, I don't want to say ego, but you're a hockey player, you're well paid, you're well known. And then all of a sudden overnight, it's like, no, not anymore. Now you're just a number, and you go and get a job somewhere else, and you're a nobody there. You're not at the top of the tree. Maybe the people there don't know much about hockey. You're just don't want to say a regular worker, but you're not thought of like you are in the hockey world. So, I mean, like I said, I was really lucky that I did a bit on my own, and the Panthers were obviously really good to me and kind of offered me the job that I've got. But for a lot of people, it's difficult, definitely.
I can't imagine, like, and a lot of people tend to be native British guys, who grow up playing the game, getting a few quid here, a few quid there, maybe some expenses. But again, their identity is the same as the guys who are getting paid a little bit more money, who maybe have been brought over. And even I know when Coventry had that deal going with the university where imports were coming over, they were doing their masters, like a master's in business administration. So they were that was part of the pull to coming over to play in the UK,
Yeah.
was that they were hooked up with a university. But it didn't seem like any of those facilities or options were given to native British players.
Yeah.
And the native British player was the underpinning the team. Without them, you'd had no team. Then all of a sudden, there were more British guys coming in, more imports coming in. And I know some really good hockey players that are really good friends of mine, particularly around the Super League era, that just were like, I'm not even going to bother, And we lost some really good hockey players because ambitious people wanted to have the league, and I'm all out for having the best hockey as possible. However, there wasn't the leagues underneath it to support the good
Yeah.
British players. And now, like you say, there's guys who who are playing hockey, getting some money, but also having a full-time job, that's sometimes very understanding, and they'll give guys leeway about showing up to work on a Monday a little bit later because they've been up in Scotland on a Sunday or something like that on a road trip. But it just still seems like there's not any support system for players, but also like in terms of maybe jobs, but in terms of this, what you're talking about is this thing of like, I'm not at the rink anymore. I'm not in the changing room. And 100% of the guys that have come on here, that's the one thing they miss.
Yeah.
It's not the games. It's not the trophies. It's not saving this and shooting this. So I miss the guys in the changing room. And then all of a sudden that's gone. What was that for? Like, obviously you're still involved and you still are around the players, but is it different for you? Do you feel like you're part of the team, but not part of the team because you're not putting the skates
Yeah.
on?
Again, I was really lucky where I didn't really skip a beat, where I finished, and then the next season I was kind of offered that job and I was still around the room all the time. You have a little bit of a different relationship with them. And I think as the years have gone on, I mean, I've not been playing now for around 5 years. I think every year you get a little bit distant because obviously the players all stay the same age because it's just new, younger guys, whereas I keep getting older. So that gap is getting bigger and bigger. And also, the first probably 3 years of me doing that role, we had a lot of the same players. So I was just still one of the guys. Whereas, like now, going into this season, there were probably only 3 guys on the team that knew me or knew who I was. So it's, I bet you if you ask some of the Panthers guys now, apart from the fact my face is in the pictures in the room, they probably don't even know that I played that much because obviously why would they? I say so.
Is it one of those things where you have to shake hands, say, "I used to play here"?
Yeah, not really. I think they just over the course of the season they'll figure it out, or they'll see my picture, or someone will mention it. But like,
yeah,
I was really lucky. I never had that cold turkey moment where I finished my last game and that was the last time I went in the room. But genuinely, I think if I had, I would have really struggled going from being with 20 guys every day to all of a sudden that just gone. And, as well, you're just silly in the room. You're just messing around, talking to your friends, watching it's like being a kid again. And for that to be taken away from you is really difficult. I say I've been really lucky that it's not really. I've been fine with it because I'm still at the home games. I still go to the rink a couple of times a week. I'm still friendly with some other guys around the league. A lot of people I played with, some of them are still playing. But I think if I'd have had that cut off, it would have been really difficult to, look on my phone and look at the Elite League scores and I'm just not part of it anymore, or, see someone winning a trophy or whatever and like, oh yeah, that used to be me or whatever. But I think everybody handles it differently. I just think you need to be prepared. Like you have to have a plan in place. And I think I also think when you finish playing is important. Like I finished playing at the right time. I played a long time. I certainly wasn't going to get any better at that age. I think if you stop playing when you're not ready to, you kind of regret it. But for me, it was like, okay, I'm not going to play anymore, and I'm comfortable with that. There's kids coming up that are going to be better than me. I'm going to miss it, but some guys probably stop early for whatever reason, whether it's injury or getting a job or family, and I think that's when you know someone like you, I'm sure you could have played a bit longer if you wanted to, but I think you have to be comfortable in it yourself that this is the right decision. I've got this, whatever I'm going to do lined up. I'm at ease with it. And then it's okay. But I think if it's, if guys in the NHL don't get contracts and they have to retire, that's when they struggle, or injury, they have to retire, or whatever it is. But I say, I can't stress enough. I was really lucky with my situation, but I can imagine a lot of people do really struggle.
Yeah, they do. And I was one of them, like you say. I mean, I was like 28 years old and I would like I was never practicing because I didn't have time. I was running a business and I was on TV, but Guildford were still giving me a spot. And it was when like Stan
Yeah.
Marple was there, and he was really appreciative of me coming on and doing a role as like on a third line. And I do remember my last game, and I actually played really, really well because my girlfriend was there, and I wanted to impress her. So I
Nice.
played. I played really. I got a Gordie Howe hat trick. But I also, what's really sad about it is that when I scored the goal, I turned and looked up and to her in the stand, and she was gone. She got bored, and she was with her girlfriend, and they left. And I was heartbroken. And I think it's really sad that that fizzled out as my last ever game. And it's only now, it's over 20 years ago, that I can reflect on it and go, how sad it really was that that was the
Yeah.
last time that I strapped on skates in competitive nature. And I didn't actually put them on again for 20 years. And I think that's the really sad part of it too, is
Yeah.
that, I didn't have a plan. And I really did suffer with, deep, dark isolation and depression for years and years and years. And people would say, why? And it was only when I actually got sober that I reflected, and I was, wow, it's when I stopped playing hockey. I never drank as a player. Like I would have a pint every couple of weeks. I was not a big drinker. But as soon as I stopped playing hockey and I was hanging out in the nightclubs in Soho, and someone introduced me to, powder and martinis, and I was like, that gave me the connection that hockey gave me. And I was like,
Yeah,
wow,
like
this is
like that camaraderie and being part of something. Yeah, no, I get that.
yeah.
Yeah, I think I think that's the thing is, again, I've still got a lot of the same friends, the guys that I played with, so I'm kind of still in that little group. But yeah, definitely, I think like you said, it sounds like you probably wanted to play more and you could have played more, and it didn't work out. But for most people, you don't really know when your last game's going to be, unless obviously it's like, oh, I'm going to retire at the end of the season. But yeah, I think I think you have to just try and be happy with your career, you know, and just kind of be at ease with it. I know it's easier said than done, but but it is hard. Like if I wasn't around the guys now, I'm obviously not from here. I don't have a lot of friends here that aren't in the hockey team. When the Panthers go on the road to Scotland for the weekend, I don't, I'm kind of like, oh, all my friends are in Scotland. But it's just about finding that new connection somewhere, new friends, whether it's in work or whatever. But I think as well, people outside of hockey, they don't understand the bus trips, the dressing room, you know, it's that side of it. It's not really the games like I'm sure your other guests have said. It's just that being around the guys, being able to just say whatever you want, and just it's a little family. And yeah, for it to go overnight like that can be really tough.
I think that's what, as you're talking and as you laid out well, here's a question. Are you ever lonely on those weekends when they're up? Do you feel sad?
Not really. Do you know what though? I'm a little bit of a lone wolf like that, where I'm actually fine. Like, I've obviously got a daughter, but I'll be with her, or I'll go to the gym, or if there's a football game, I'll put up. I'm quite comfortable being by myself. I'm not a big drinker or going out and being, doing loads of things like that. But I can imagine a lot of people would be, if they're used to, you know, having a game on a Saturday night, and then when they don't have a game, they just sat around like trying to fill that void. I'm kind of quite comfortable in it. But again, I can imagine that's a tough time of day for people. Maybe you found it on a Saturday, Sunday night. You're like, oh, I should be with all my friends at the rink, and I'm just sat in my house, and it's just a weird time. But yeah, so yeah, never really thought of that. But yeah, I can imagine that's a tough time too.
The last time I saw you was up in Nottingham for the GB tournament where they got promoted. There was a few you were in a box with Clarkey, and there was a lot of old hockey, not old hockey folk who's been around. Um, the question I want to ask is what does hockey mean to you? Like if you think about like from the time that you signed with the Bees and those times ragging pucks in Bracknell at practice and me, I kind of looked over at your box and like you say, you had a couple of ex-Nottingham guys in there like Clarkey and some guys who are still involved with the game. And I was just trying to think to myself, you guys have got this group of people who still are connected with the game. And it's a big question, but what does hockey mean to you?
I think it means everything really, which kind of sounds crazy when you think, it's just a game. But I mean, for me, ever since I was 10 years old, that's been the one constant in my life. It's been the one thing that, you break up with girlfriends or you leave school or you ever, but hockey's been there really since I was 10. And it's kind of got you everything, not necessarily a lot of money or anything, but it's, all my friendships, who I am as a person, how people perceive you. And even now, it's, I'm not massively involved. Obviously, I'm still with the Panthers, but, I'll still watch all the NHL highlights. I still root for a team in the NHL. I've still got loads of friends that play the game. It's still everything, really. It's, obviously I'm working in massage now, and I've got a daughter, and I'm obviously doing other things. But for me, it's the word I'd use is that one constant. It binds me with all my friends. Really, I've only got one or two friends from school that I'm really close with now. But every friend I have is because of hockey. Whether I played with them, against them, whether they're to do with the Panthers, maybe they work. Everybody, even people at the gym, they know me because of the hockey and stuff. And
Mm.
it's yeah, I think from the moment for me anyway, that I got into it, it's been everything. It's all I did as a kid, really. I played it professionally for 13 years. Ever since I retired, I've done it as a job. I say all my friends are either
Mm.
involved still, or obviously they're still my friends that I played with. And I don't really see that ever changing. I mean, as I get older, eventually I probably won't do the job with the Panthers, obviously forever. But I'll always have those friendships, the Clarkies, the Lackos, all the people you mentioned. I'll
Mm.
always follow British hockey. Hopefully, I'll still be involved in British hockey in some way. The NHL. It's one of those things that it's everything really. It's you know everything else comes and goes and whatever. But it's yeah, I think really since day one, it just sort of it takes over your life and that's it. Really. I'm sure it's the same in other sports. If you're a boxer or a footballer, it's the same thing. But yeah, it's everything that I am and
Mm.
everything I've done since I'm 10 is really through hockey. So
A final question is why hockey? And I'm going to ask you from the perspective of a guy who has very unique perspective because a coach watches from the bench but never steps on the ice. A goalie is on the ice most of the time, all the time, right? During from the drop of the puck to the end
yeah,
of the game. Players are on and off for shifts, but they're not really watching too much. They observe what's going on and their shifts and who they're going to take on and off. But as a backup goalie, you get to really observe what's going on the bench, the language that's being used, the people, so but then everything that's going on the ice. Got to say, the way in which you view hockey, not a lot of people have been able to see. It's a very privileged and rare position. And I'm imagining you've got a viewpoint that I can't understand. So all of this passion, when I say, when you say hockey is everything to me, here's the question is why?
I think it was like when I was playing, I was always if I was on the bench for a game, it was a tough one because you probably won't get on. See, I think the thing with being a goalie is it's such a critical position. So as a goalie, I'm kind of sat there and I'm probably not going to get on. However, if I do get on, the whole outcome of the game might rest on my performance. So if you've got a player that plays on the fourth line who gets two shifts a period, he'll get on, probably hit somebody, whatever, that's it. Whereas for a goalie who's on the bench, I could sit there for 30, 40 minutes, and it's happened loads of times. The number one goalie gets injured. I'm into the game, and the whole game rests on me. It's not like, oh, I'll just see out the rest. It's like, if it's a 2-2 game and I come into it, I'm either winning this game or I'm losing it. And it's like that, obviously it's not always like that. Sometimes you go into a game because you're down 3-0 or you're up 6-1 or something. But like, yeah, I think it's a tough one on the bench where I would always prepare for a game like I was starting, like even when I wasn't. So I would do the same routine, even though in the back of my head I knew I wasn't starting, I would almost trick myself into thinking I was, so that if the goalie gets hurt in warm up, if the goalie, I was around so long, I've seen it all. I've been on the ice after 5 minutes, after 10 minutes. I've been on the ice in Belfast when we're tied with 5 minutes left and then we won in a shootout. It's like you have to just be prepared. You do sit and chill and watch the game, but like you have to know at any moment you could go in and then it's 100% on you, really. So yeah, it's one of those positions that's it's a bit stressful, but yeah, it was a lot of fun.
I think you've hit the word stressful. And I think what I've got from you, which is a new insight, is that the stress that a backup goalie feels could be greater than just about any other position. Because, like you said, you're stepping on the ice with 5 minutes to go and it's 2-2, and you're either going to win it or lose it.
Yeah,
Like that's pressure that,
and
guys, that,
yeah,
yeah,
I think with the stress as well, people don't realize that like if you're the number one goalie, if you're Jody Lehman and you have a bad game, he's still going to start the next game. If he has another bad game, he's probably still going to start the next game. I'm not going to start for the Steelers the year we win the league unless he's injured or, another circumstance. But for me, if I start a game, if Corey gives me a start and I don't play well, he might not do that again for 6 weeks. Or if we're down by 3 and Corey's like, right, get Greener in, like they do, put the backup in, change the momentum, and I don't play well, he won't do that again. So it's like, if I only get 15 minutes in a game, that's like my moment on the stage to kind of, be like, then the next time it happens, if I do well, he'll do it again. Or, oh, we've got a 3-3 in Scotland, like Dan can play the middle game because I know he can, but we have such small snippets to kind of, prove that we can do it. Even if I come into a game and we're up 6-1 and Corey's given me the last 8 minutes, I need to play well for those 8 minutes. No one
yeah,
else cares about the game. And all of the players on our team mail it in because they're like, oh, we're up 6-1, whatever. And I'm there like, no, like, we need to do well
yeah,
here. And you know what?
yeah.
They always did for me. And I think I like to attribute that to they know how, what I gave to the team and like, let's do this, let's see this game out. But like, people don't realize that, when those backups go in, that's their audition basically. And it's like, you might only get 2 or 3 of them a month, but you need to make sure that you're on. So yeah, it's stressful, even if it's in a game that means nothing to most people. So
Yeah. Dude, what a way to end your third period. You've given me some insights into to a position that I haven't really thought of before. So thanks for that, and thanks for your story. It's awesome.
no, the pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Now we are going to head into overtime because I do like thinking about purpose and thinking about your role now and what you've done and how you still are connected to the game. Do you think now that you're like for some people like their identity as a player ends and then they have to find a new purpose and define something for them? You're a very compassionate guy. You're a father. You've been around. You think about a lot of people. You've had a lot of pressure on you in this last week. Do you think that in doing what you do and in terms of the tragedy that happened, you've had to step up and you've had to do some things that were probably pretty uncomfortable? Do you think that all of the stuff that has happened in your life has prepared you to fulfill a purpose now, in terms of being at a team that needs a lot of support through a tragedy, and that you've got the tools to be able to help people, and I suppose really help you with your purpose in fulfilling the role now as a supporter?
Yeah, I think so. I think hockey's one of those things that, I always say that it's not grades on the paper, but, I've probably learned as much from hockey as I did from school in some senses. It's different, but, it's the teamwork, it's the selflessness, it's the, working together as a team. As well in hockey, there's a lot of rules, in the dressing room, and it's very structured. You have to follow there's a code, isn't there, in hockey? And I think that when you grow up, you start off at the bottom of the ladder and you pay your dues, and you get a bit older, and there's a very sort of a strict code, I would say, in hockey, the way you're brought up and the way you have to act and the way you treat people. And I think that's taught me a lot. I mean, it hasn't offered you from hockey, you don't potentially get qualifications and education and a route to a life after hockey, but I think you have to pick up things you learn from hockey and use them in your normal day-to-day life. Like, I'm really punctual, I'm always on time, because I know at hockey I'll get fined if I'm late for practice, if I'm late for the gym. I'd like to think I'm respectful to people, because you learn when you're young, you treat the veterans like they're gods, and they're like, so I think hockey's taught me a lot, and I think it's really put me in good stead to be, hopefully a good father, and have other jobs in life. But yeah, obviously it doesn't, hockey doesn't give you other jobs. It doesn't kind of, just because you're a really good athlete or you're good at hockey, you might not be good at any other job. But I think you have to take things you learn in hockey just to use in life as a person, if that makes sense.
Beautiful. I love it. Hockey doesn't give you jobs, but it gives you the tools to be able to be good
Yeah,
for other jobs. Yeah,
I think
I
so.
love
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
it teaches you like discipline, and it's coming back from losses and not getting too high or too low, or all those kind of things. It's to do with sport, but they're all the same rules for life, really. It's like, but you're not handed a job. I was really lucky, but you're not really set up for another job necessarily, but you get good contacts. You know you're taught a lot of good rules. Hopefully you're fit and healthy, and you kind of pick up things on the way. So it definitely sets you up well, but you have to use those things that you kind of learn through hockey, I think.
And what another great way to end our overtime period, buddy. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Repurpose. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure it'll be helpful to a lot of folks. So thanks very much, buddy.
No worries. I'll catch you soon.
All right, take it easy, Dan. Folks, Dan Green joining us on Repurpose. Don't forget, I'm gonna launch this series of 6, and then we're gonna come out more regularly, and we'll see how it all goes depending on the feedback of this. But we hope you enjoy it. But for now, it's bye for now.